I've been asked to do an interview about You Had It Coming, which in my career is one of my favourite records and one of the most inspiring processes that I took part in. So I've got some questions here that have been written down for me. I'll read them out and then try and answer them as clearly and simply as possible, and in the hope that you'll find the answers quite helpful. Question 1 here: what was your role in the process of creation / composition of the songs? And to answer that question, I was asked to. They were interested in having me as producer of the album, which became You Had It Coming, and actually it was an unusual request as far as I was concerned, because really I was really only used to working with bands and singers. I hadn't really done any instrumental music, and I consequently thought it perhaps wasn't the right job for me. But out of respect for Jeff, who was a legend, I thought it would only be fair if we took a meeting, and having had that meeting, we hit it off really well and decided we'd give it a go. So I had time to listen through to some of Jeff's previous recordings and felt that I wanted to do something a little different with him, and in my mind I had the idea that we would do something a bit like a Chemical Brothers kind of record. So steeped in these kind of ideas, I set about working on the record. What I was presented with at the beginning was a few demos which had been put together by the band, including the song Earthquake, which was written by Jenny Batten, and then Jeff had the idea to do the Nitin Sawhney track, Nadia, a cover of Rolling and Tumbling, and apart from that, everything was open territory, really. As far as the writing composition of the tracks are concerned, that was really not on the table at the beginning. It became our thing when we started working together. I was operating the computer at a pace which he wasn't really used to, and so all he had to do really was come and play. And I'll explain a little bit more detail as we go on, but what I did is I found a way to compose with Jeff, to sort of create openings for him and opportunities for him to just play as well as he could and then create compositions out of it. So in short, my role originally was to be the producer of the record, and obviously I then became a collaborator on the record and the co-writer of most of the pieces. Question 2 here, it said, you said that both Jeff and I found the beats inspiring, so I set up 10-minute stretches of the most developed part of the beat, and we jammed to it. It seems that apart from the drum loop, there are lots of guitar loops too. Did you work in the way Miles Davis and Tio Macero did for Bitches Brew or In a Silent Way, selecting the best parts and making a lot of edits to create the final structure of the tune? Exactly, except that in 1970, when Miles Davis did Bitches Brew, he didn't obviously have the technology that I did, and so my guess is that they recorded extremely long passages and then edited things on tape. That was really our approach. Obviously, going back to the first question when I spoke about Chemical Brothers, those kind of beats, I made that my first job. I had a guy called Aidan Love, who was actually assistant on another record I'd made a year or two before, and I found him really quite inspiring with his beats. He had a pedal board, and he basically ran beats through the pedal board and did filters and created these things. So I briefed him to make beats that actually sounded like pieces of music in themselves, that you could play. And that's what he delivered. So I wasn't really expecting it to work quite as well as it did. But anyway, he'd give me a DAT cassette, and on that cassette there was a beat. I put it into what was then Digital Performer for me, because I hadn't moved to Pro Tools, but I put it in Digital Performer, made a loop of maybe my favourite bit, or I combined two beats together, and I stretched them out for maybe 10 minutes or 12 minutes. And then what I did is Jeff would arrive, and he really, really liked the sound of the beats. He had his Stratocaster special edition, of course, going into a live room with a fairly poorly insulated booth with a glass window. And then in there he'd have a JCM 800 and a Marshall 4x4 with an SM57 in front. And in between that, he had a Crybaby pedal. And from there, it went into an 1176 compressor and straight into my Performer with a few plugins, but not really used much at that point. So what I did is, the main thing was to get Jeff to play, being a seasoned player of many, many years. And, the main challenge really was to make him interested in what he was doing. And given, that he'd have a 10-minute stretch of beat to play to, I had a keyboard. I'm not a virtuoso by any means like Jeff is, and like probably most of the people he's played with, but I was able to play a bass line or hold down some chords or just change it around so that he wasn't feeling alone with just people watching him. I just got into the performance and then promptly lost all of my stuff as soon as I got lots of good stuff from him. What I found was that he would all of a sudden find something that he was playing that he really, really enjoyed playing. And then from that moment on, it was easy because it was just, riff after riff and noise after noise and sounds. So I just had it always in record, 10-minute stretches. We did about 5 or 6 per track. And then I began to edit. The way that I did that on songs like Roy's Toy or You Had It Coming was I made little imaginary baskets, and in those baskets I would put riffs, and then another one which would just be on the page really. It'd just be I'd copy them down and then I'd sort of mark it out with a pen. This one is a riff, and then having that, and then I'd do textures, solo bits, chords, whatever. And then I'd just set about doing a composition with those bits. So I'd go through the items marked riff, choose my favourite, and that I'd call the chorus. I'd put that in a loop, and underneath that I'd suddenly find a texture from one of the textures basket that sounded really good underneath it. So I'd do that, balance it. And this was balanced against the beat we played to. And, I suppose it was better than magic in the sense that it was educated, but there was a lot of magic happening there where things just blended together and worked really well, unexpectedly. And that's what we ended up with. And it was, very quick and very inspirational. He really liked it, and so did I. So that's how we got those results. Can you tell me more about the process of creation of Blackbird? Did you submit an already edited backing track to Jeff, or did he choose the best bird parts before editing them all together? Well, having read these questions through, the question 5, I think, question 6 is about Nadia. We did Nadia first, and in a way it informed how we worked on Blackbird. By the time we'd done Nadia, we kind of got into a certain mindset, and Jeff just came in one morning and said, I was kept awake by the sound of a blackbird singing in the garden. It was beautiful, but it kept me awake. And then I sort of went, well, why don't we see if you can play that, the blackbird, which is... So we got in touch with a rental company and rented the BBC sound effects of birds tweeting. And we looked for the song of the blackbird. And then what I did is I sampled all of the best riffs of the blackbird into my Akai S1200, I think it was, or an S1000 or an S1200. And then I made a preset with 10 blackbird riffs or something across there. Now, the thing about the blackbird is that it sings at a pace and a pitch that you can't really fathom. So the next thing we did was to tune that whole program down 2 octaves. So anything that went do 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 do, actually that was an octave higher with the bird singing it. I'd tune it down 2 octaves so it went do 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 do. Excuse the bad singing. And then I'd actually play that in with the sound of a Fender Rhodes, just sort of more sine wavy kind of easy sound, and then Jeff would play it. He'd sort of play it together, and then we sort of constructed it from there, really. I met someone that was a friend of Jeff's and said he was sort of demystified it for him in a way, because he kind of imagined that Jeff was out in the garden playing with the blackbird, and it wasn't like that, but it sounds like that, hopefully, and comes across. It was a sort of later track that we did in the record. We were sort of, quite spent on ideas, and we wanted to keep it short, the album anyway, so that's what we came up with. A lot of people talked about it in time past, and it is quite a special piece. You said that Jeff had only his guitar plugged in, a Crybaby and a Marshall JCM 800 and his incredible right hand. Does it mean that all the other effects, ring modulated, delay, were added in post-prod? For example, the beginning of Earthquake, Rosebud, Roy's Toy. Well, the core of all those sounds were literally just Jeff, the Crybaby, going into the JCM 800 and him sort of, just manipulating the sound through the filter. So there wasn't really a rig modulator involved in anything. Yes, there were some delays that we added delays, especially to the more sort of languid parts to give it kind of some context. But largely it was just that setup with Jeff making phenomenal sounds with his hands, fingers, and his extremely wide knowledge of how to create sounds with an amp and with a guitar and with gain and with that sort of stuff. Now, obviously, not everything was done like that, but most of it. The beginning of Earthquake was actually part of a demo that was made by Jenny Batten, and so that was the first track we worked on. Actually, became the first track on the record as well. So my guess is that Jenny would probably have had some filters and rising filters on that, but I kind of inherited that part of the song and then just built from there. Do you remember how Jeff played the main theme of Rosebud circa 120? I think he played it through his Marshall, gain 10 plus bottleneck, maybe an octave and a wah, but I'm not sure of it. Everything that you say, except for the octaver. I think he just did that with just the pitch of the guitar, but definitely the bottleneck, and yes, Marshall gain 10 plus bottleneck, almost certainly. These tracks happen very fast in many ways, so actually I'm a bit sketchy on some of the details. Also, it is 20 years ago now, so but seems like yesterday. Question number 6. You already explained it in your 2010s interview, but can you tell me how Nadia was made? Well, Nadia was Jeff's idea. He'd heard the Nitin Sawhney version. He really wanted to play it. And Nitin Sawhney was really, really happy that Jeff wanted to do it and actually came and joined us for a day in the process. I played the chords on a Roland JD800 and programmed the beat, which was some bongos and kind of fairly simple beat. I did most of that program. When it came to doing the guitar on that, it was a similar thing to the Blackbird. The Indian singing on there, I kind of figured out pretty much that Nitin would have had the singer sing all the way through the track a few times and chosen her best bits and then tied them into structure pretty much like I was doing, really. So what I did is I found those bits and then I put them into my structure so that I knew what we had to achieve. But what I found was that, again, as with the sound of the Blackbird, it was impossible to notate that, to hear the notation, really, because of all the quarter tones. So what I did was, again, tune down one octave in this instance for Nadia, and so that we could hear, I said in octaves, and then played it on a thing. So then Jeff just sort of found the way to play all of them, which was pure genius in some instances, because, just some of the notes are going so fast. I don't know if you've heard him play it live. Go and check it out on YouTube, because whatever we did to create that, he learnt it and played it live as a part of the live show. And sometimes the studio process is like that. You don't even know really what you're going to do in the day when you get in. You just do it. And then, we would say, let's work on Nadia today. We didn't plan it the day before. We just decided to do it. And that seemed to be the way to do it. So I edited those bits together, and that's what we got. Amazing. And one of the most inspirational tracks that I've worked on for sure. What about the voices heard in several tracks? Did you use samples that you edited in post-production, or did singers sing live? Okay, so on that record, first of all, we'll start with Rolling and Tumbling. I'd met Imogen Heap. I worked on her first album, which was called I Megaphone, and found her completely inspirational. And as it turned out, Jeff had also met her. I think I met her as an 18-year-old. I think Jeff must have done too, 18 or 19 years old, at some kind of writing camp, and just thought, wow, what an incredible talent. So because there was that conversation, I spoke to Jeff about it and said, shall we give Imogen a call? And she agreed to do it and came in. She only did one session with us, and while she was there, I got her to jam on top of Dirty Mind as well. And on that track, you just hear these, breaths and oh my God and things like that, which I sort of edited into the structure. So she was a feature singer. On Earthquake, those vocals came from Jenny Batten, and it says something like "did not was," which was an anecdote that they told, which was just part of their touring, anecdote history. So that's what we did. I used the samples that she gave me for that. And I think that is all the vocals that are on that record. We did try to put some more on. We tried on the next album, Jeff, as well. You also worked on Jeff. Did you use the same process or work in a different way? Well, first of all, You Had It Coming was very successful for us. I mean, obviously Jeff won his Grammy for that, and it was all largely, it was a beautiful process. It took about 7 to 8 weeks from start to finish, including the composition time. So it was miraculously quick. And when we came to doing Jeff, which Jeff really wanted to do another record with me, which was a pleasure, because I knew he didn't generally like to work with producers more than once. But we came at it with a slightly different mindset that we had to change something. So we tried to create live sessions that I would edit the whole multi-track. So the same sort of process, but we'd all get together. And that's how the song Troubled Man happened, for example. Just an multi-track edited jam. But there were many other contributors on that record. Some people that I'd brought to the table. Dean Garcia worked on a couple of things. Apollo 440 worked on a couple of tracks. And in terms of composition, various people that I introduced Jeff to, and people that you knew, Tony Hymas obviously did Why Lord Oh Why, I think it was called. Again, 17, 18 years ago, and I haven't looked at the track list for a while. So there were quite a few more contributing composers on that record, and I took the producer's job and co-wrote 3 or 4 of the tracks with Jeff, and co-wrote with 1 or 2 of the people. I think over the years, I've made 4 or 5 albums a year, or been involved in that for 35 years. It's quite a long while, and they all vary in terms of process. But You Had It Coming was the most immaculate process in a way, because nothing got in the way. We got through with it. Jeff enjoyed it. We laughed a lot. He's a very funny guy. We just told jokes all the time, and he felt very comfortable. And that's how we managed to get that result quite quickly. So very proud of that moment. And on Jeff, I think that if anything hindered that project in a way, it was that we decided to change the process a bit. And if we'd have kept on the same track, we would have probably had a sort of duo of albums that were quite similar. But then, you've always got to move on. So it's delightful to do that. And of course, after that, I ended up producing a track for Luciano Pavarotti, the great song Caruso, with the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra, and at the outset of that, Jeff came to the studio and I told him I was doing that track, and he heard it and got very excited and wanted to play on it. And so he did. He turned up with a guitar in hand and an amp. Normally never came on his own with that. Normally got his technician to bring it, but no, he really was keen. Came 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night or something just to do the night session, to be on that song, which was really inspirational and again something that, of course, in terms of having a complete set of wonderful, amazing artists, having Luciano Pavarotti, Jeff Beck, and the Royal Philharmonic, it couldn't be better, really. And that is all I can say, really, about the You Had It Coming interview. Whatever you're doing, I wish you good luck, and whatever process it takes, I hope you do well. Take care. Bye-bye.